Welcome everyone to the webinar tonight, Digital Dangers Discussing Tech-Facilitated Gender-Based Violence Through School Experiences. We are starting right on time, 7 to 8 p.m. My name is Andrea Haefele. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a teacher in the York Region District School Board, currently seconded as a health and physical education curriculum consultant here at Ophea. If you are entered into the room right now, we welcome you to share your pronouns. So hop into the chat or update your screen name in the Zoom and feel free to introduce yourself. We would like to acknowledge and thank the Government of Ontario for their funding support, which has made it possible to provide this webinar in addition to the suite of gender-based violence prevention resources that we will highlight later on in the webinar. So thank you so much. Thank you, Ode. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for being here. I'm going to go over some housekeeping items that you see on your slide right now. First off, if you need technical support, we ask you to use the private chat option in the drop-down menu to connect with my colleague Ode or Katie on the back end. Please use the chat or the Q&A functions to communicate with our team of presenters. The Q&A, question and answer tool at the bottom of your Zoom toolbar can be accessed, and the closed captioning can be turned on under the More option along the bottom of your screen. Okay? Thank you for that. Welcome. Thank you for introducing yourself. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. Thank you, Ode. On behalf of Ophea, I want to acknowledge that Ophea's work takes place on traditional Indigenous territories across Ontario, with our office located on the traditional Indigenous territory of the Huron-Wendat, Anishinaabe, and Haudenosaunee, the Mississaugas of the Credit Nation and the Métis Nation. By learning, understanding, and acknowledging, we wish to pay respect to the rich Indigenous history of Ontario. When we acknowledge our land today, we also want to recognize the links between colonization and rape culture and the reality that we can't end gender-based violence without decolonization. It's important for us to hear and respect the stories and recommendations for change from Indigenous peoples who have experienced gender-based violence. Learning from these stories is essential to the process of truth and reconciliation. So thank you for holding space for me to share the land acknowledgement. Ode, if we can go on to the next slide. Thank you. We really want to make sure that we create a safer and braver space for everyone by respecting others as they share their thoughts and or questions this evening. On your slide are some webinar norms, and I would like to review our commitments to one another in this space. So we encourage curiosity and an openness to hearing each other's perspectives, but we also really want to make sure that in order to allow for productive discussion, we are committed to maintaining a space that demonstrates mutual respect. There is a zero tolerance policy in place for language or actions that jeopardize this shared value. Okay, thank you. So I'm going to review the agenda that you see on your slide right now. We're going to start off with some context setting and some stats that we have prepared for yourself. Then we would like to share the floor with Katie Mendes and then my colleague Andrea Barrow, who's an ambassador here at Ophea. And then we're hoping to move on to a panel discussion and also allow an opportunity for us to answer your questions that you've submitted prior to registration. And then at the end, we'll share some Ophea resources that we wanted to showcase and also share a call to action with everyone who's attending the webinar tonight. Okay. Okay, here we go. Look at these lovely smiles. So we have two lovely guests with us here tonight who will be sharing their thoughts and their experience and their expertise in this space, in this topic area. Andrea, you've worked with us for a while now as an Ophea ambassador. I wanted to share the mic with you if you can share a little bit about how you enter into this space tonight.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Andrea Barrow, pronouns she, her. I'm the Equity and Inclusion Consultant with the Limestone District School Board with responsibilities from grade 7 to 12. I've been in this role now for probably about 4 to 5 years. I've worked with Ophea as an ambassador and many different other roles probably over the past 8 or 9 years. So I am I don't want to say excited, but the number of people that we have online is an indication that there is a real need for this education. So I'm looking forward to the other presenter as well. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Katie Mendes as well.
Thanks for that. And yeah, thanks everybody for giving up your time to be here tonight. I've been studying digital technologies in young people's lives for about 15 years. This is something that I've been really interested in. I think it's a growing problem. I think it's something that we really need to tackle. And I think schools are a really great place, an important place, not the only place, but I think schools play a really important role. And I've been working with Ophea, I think, for about 3 years. So it's really great to be talking with teachers who I think have lots of questions. They're struggling, they're being asked to deal with a lot of these issues, and hopefully events like this help give teachers a little bit more confidence, information, and knowing what they can do and how they can approach these issues.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Katie. I also wanted to share that joining us today is Kayla Coates from the Chatham-Kent Sexual Assault Crisis Center. She is a support and advocacy worker offering short and long-term counseling for survivors of sexual violence, as well as the public education coordinator. I'd want to offer both a private chat option and a private breakout room option, depending on what the person is most comfortable with. They can reach out to Kayla directly through a private chat, or you can also let us know and the Ophea side know if you want support from her. And you can also reach her into the breakout room too. Okay. Thank you so much, Kayla, for joining us tonight. Okay. On the slide, we wanted to get a feel of who's in the room, and we have created some framing poll questions. Our planning team is just going to populate those questions onto your end. Thank you so much. I'll read and scribe the questions out for you. So the first one, do you think deepfakes are a form of gender-based violence, particularly affecting girls and women through non-consensual pornographic images or videos? Yes, no, or not sure. And the second question, do you believe deepfakes pose a significant threat to individual privacy and dignity? Yes, they are a significant threat, somewhat, but not a major threat. No, they do not pose a threat, or not sure. We'll give a few more seconds for everyone to participate in the poll questions. There we go. Ooh, look at that, Andrea, Katie. 94% for question number 1. Not sure. That's okay. Number 2, 97% for did you believe deepfakes pose a significant threat to individual privacy and dignity? Okay. Katie and Andrea, this is very interesting, eh?
Yeah, it is. And again, I think it's really great, or it's good to see that many people know. And I think these are things that we're going to talk about, especially kind of different rights, thinking about how deepfakes are a form of gender-based violence, a very modern form.
Yeah. Okay, we'll get started into some context setting. Thank you, Ode. So every person has the right to respect privacy, dignity, and freedom from harassment, and especially students. And when we think about the students in our school communities, when we talk about deepfakes may be used to generate entertainment. However, they may also be used to create and share false, degrading, and humiliating images of an individual with the intent to cause harm. Deepfakes can affect all people. However, they disproportionately affect girls and women who are almost always the target of non-consensual pornographic deepfake images or videos, constituting another form of gender-based violence. And I know Katie will share some facts in her research about that. On the slide right now, I wanted to share some facts with you. Thank you. So over 90% of deepfakes online are non-consensual pornographic clips of women. 74% of Canadians under 30 have encountered a deepfake. So think about the students who are in our school community and what they see or experience online. And 31% of young people come across them on a weekly basis. So we'll talk a little bit more about the bystander effect and what that entails if we want to teach students how to be a supportive ally. Thank you, Ode, for sharing. Okay, let's get started. So I'm going to pass the mic over to Katie. Katie, thank you so much for taking time in your evening to share your research and your expertise in this space. I'll pass it to you.
Okay, thanks so much, Andrea. Before I begin, I just want to give a content warning that I am going to be talking about different forms of sexualized harms. I have some images in my slides that you may find jarring, maybe distressing, so it's please just a note to take care of yourself. Okay, so I'm here on behalf of the DIY Digital Safety Team, and I always like to acknowledge that I'm just a quarter of this team. So we're a group of scholars who've been going around Canada talking to teens about their experiences of various online harms. So tonight, when I talk about the law, I'm really drawing from the expertise of my colleague Susie Dunn. She's a legal scholar, and so she, knows all the ins and outs about different laws around non-consensual image sharing and deepfakes. Alexa Dodge is one of Canada's top experts when it comes to non-consensual distribution of intimate images. And Chris Dietzel has a lot of expertise, especially around queer people's experiences of these online harms. So together over the past 3 years, we've gone around Canada and we conducted focus groups, so 25 focus groups with almost 150 teens. And we did this research in Alberta, Ontario, Nova Scotia, Quebec, and the Yukon. We were really trying to get a wide diversity in terms of race, in terms of sexuality, in terms of location, urban, rural. And then we also conducted a survey with over 1,000 teens, specifically on their experiences of online harms. So when we think about their experiences, we can break them down into sexualized or non-sexualized harms. And next slide, Ode. I'm going to start with just a broad overview of the sexualized harms that they experienced. So teens told us about their experiences of online harassment, so maybe kind of mean comments that were sexualized. They told us about how people were using digital technologies to stalk them, so maybe snap maps or geolocation. They told us about the use of secret cameras to take these kind of secret sexual photos of them. They told us about their experiences of non-consensual sharing of intimate images, so whether they had images sent to them without consent or their own images that were shared without their consent. They talked about pressure to send intimate images. And increasingly, although it wasn't a huge part of our sample when we did the research, we're hearing about deep fake nudes, so these artificially generated images. And then finally, we're hearing about sextortion. So teens sometimes call this catfishing, and it's a different form of kind of financial scam. So I could focus on all of these different kinds of harms, but tonight I'm going to focus a little bit more on deep nudes. In recent weeks, some of you may have heard about Grok, which is X's AI tool that has been undressing women or children. And these are just a few examples of headlines that you've seen. So there have been some research that's already been conducted, and one found that Grok was producing sexualized images of children every 41 seconds. So unlike other nudify apps, Grok wasn't actually making these children completely naked, but was undressing them. It would be doing things like showing children in string bikinis. This is really interesting because this doesn't necessarily count as child sexual abuse material or child pornography. And this actually seems to kind of fall within this legal loophole. But there are other apps that completely nudify people. And there are many that are very easy to find and free, and some of them are even available on the App Store. So you can often find them temporarily on the App Store before they're taken down. So this is a screenshot of just one such app. It's called Nudify Online. There are many different examples that I could have shared with you. As Andrea said, most deep nudes are made of women by men. And some deep nude apps explicitly state that deep nude technology was not intended for use with male subjects because the training data that they use is women. So basically, some of them are very explicit saying that they can't nudify men. And I'm not saying that that should be our aim, but they don't, the apps are not trained with images of men. They even if you wanted to, they can't make these images of men. So really kind of showing how highly gendered they are. Now, there will be some deepfake creators or consumers or even researchers that claim that these synthetic images don't cause harm because they're not real. But we know that findings from international studies disagree. So there was a recent study by some folks who did a survey of over 17,000 people across 10 countries, and most participants identified deep nudes as harmful, and they supported legal interventions. And it's actually quite wild, but depending on the province in which you live and the age of the person in the image, they may or may not have protection under existing laws. So in provinces like British Columbia, there are civil laws that one can apply to press for damages and image removal. Now, there are other provinces that have laws against non-consensual distribution of intimate images, but there are gaps because these laws don't explicitly indicate that these synthetic images are covered. They're not included in what's counted as an intimate image. So we find that these definitions of what intimate images are actually inconsistent across the country. And what we know is that it's going to take time and some research and experimentation to develop a law that properly addresses these non-consensual synthetic intimate images. But we know that for civil laws, like in BC and New Brunswick, PEI and Saskatchewan, they have laws around non-consensual image sharing that include synthetic images. But in Alberta, Newfoundland and Labrador and Manitoba, it looks like they don't apply. And in Ontario, we don't have an explicit law against non-consensual sharing of intimate images. So these deep nudes and undressing images are part of what scholars are now calling TFSV. So next slide, please. So when we're talking about tech-facilitated sexual violence, this may be a new term for some of you. It's an umbrella term that refers to harmful sexual behaviors that are happening via digital technologies. And one of the reasons why scholars like this push towards this language is because it recognizes that the violence can be something that happens offline, but is filmed or recorded or kind of like mediated through a form of tech. Or it can be something that happens wholly online. So if we think about the deep nude apps, you can have someone's picture, like contact isn't kind of made in person, but recognizing that this harm can flow on and offline. So if you have a deep nude that's created of you and it's shared without your consent, it can have significant emotional harms, psychological harms that carries with you into these offline spaces. So we argue that having precise language is important for lawmakers, researchers, and educators and sexual violence support services because it helps us to develop norms and best practices and regulations to address this new form of harm. So rather than having a deep nude created of you a form of cyberbullying, which kind of sounds trivial, it sounds like it's something that you should just get over, recognizing it as a form of tech-facilitated sexual violence can really ground it in the fact that rights have been violated, that this is something serious that needs to be taken seriously. So Susie Dunn has argued words used to describe a phenomenon shape the legal and social understandings of that experience. And I think that is really important. So that's why we're really trying to push for kind of very specific definitions here. So that is kind of a very brief overview of some of the sexualized forms of harm. Next slide, please. Oh, yeah, sorry. Thank you. You're there. Just to kind of give an overview, teens also told us about a range of other harms that maybe we can chat about in the Q&A that are not sexualized but are still really important. So homophobic, transphobic, misogynistic, and racist comments online, outing people online, mis and disinformation, impersonating people, so creating fake accounts to embarrass them, to humiliate them, tech being used to buy or sell drugs, to track people so that they can attack them, financial scams. And as you can see in this image, this is something that a teen drew for us in their research. We're seeing the proliferation of harmful, authentic, gory, and extremist videos that young people are being fed, often through platforms like TikTok. So this was a teen who told us about seeing a cat that was being blended up, but teens told us about seeing people being hit by cars, seeing people being shot, etc. So if we kind of think together about the kinds of harms that people are experiencing and some overall findings, here's a few kind of key takeaway points. So the first is that experiences are very much shaped by identity and personal interests. So basically saying that, the kinds of things that people are experiencing and exposed to is very much based on their sexuality, on their gender, on their age, on their race. And we know that algorithms are playing a role in some of the content that people are seeing. So often we think about these harms as being interpersonal, I created a deep nude of someone and then I'm sending it to all of my friends, which absolutely happens. But algorithms and the way that these platforms are designed are also fueling these harms. So platforms, if thinking about TikTok, which has a very sensitive algorithm, is recommending and pushing certain kind of content to certain people. So we know that teen boys are absolutely targeted by porn bots. Girls are sent a lot of videos about body dysmorphia, and boys in particular are being fed a lot of this authentic, violent extremist content. So when we're thinking about addressing some of these problems, we can't just think interpersonally, we have to think about the structure and the design of the platforms. And so maybe just the kind of final point here is that there isn't a one-size-fits-all approach. So we recognize that there's different harms that are happening to different groups of people, which means that the solutions that we come up with, the educational messages, need to be nuanced and they need to be diverse. We can't just have the same message for everybody. Okay, so that's just a brief overview of that. I want to just take some time to dive more into some of the survey findings that we did. So we recently did the survey with over 1,000 teens, age 13 to 18, and we were specifically asking them about their experiences of these tech-facilitated forms of violence. And we found that 28% of our respondents experienced at least one type of harm. When thinking about deep fakes, only 3% of our sample reported knowing that someone had made a deep fake nude of them. But another study that I was recently involved with actually found that the number rose to 17%. So about a year later, this more recent survey of over 1,000 people found that 17% knew that this has happened to them. And again, it's very likely that in many cases, deep nudes are made of people without their knowledge. In the survey that the DIY team did, we found 47% had at least one type of harm happen to someone that they know. So not necessarily of them, but of someone that they know. And again, if I'm going back to the deep nudes, 8% of our sample found that they knew someone who'd had a deep nude made of them. But in the more recent study that I did, we found that that number was again up to 17%. And we also asked teens about their perpetration. And in our study, 7% admitted to doing at least one of these types of harms. And when it came to deep nudes, we had 2% of people admitted to creating a deep nude of someone else. Now, we think that these numbers are very low. We know that there's kind of issues with self-reported behavior, but we anticipate that those numbers are growing, especially as these apps are becoming more popular, as we saw with Grok, as they're actually being integrated into some of the platforms that people are using. Next slide, please. Our research was also very interested in what do young people do when they experience these kinds of harms? And we can see here that a lot of young people don't tell anyone. That's quite common. But it is quite heartening here to see that over 40% of youth are telling a parent or guardian, they're telling their friends. But you can see that actually there's very little trust in the teachers, principals, or the school. And that's something that we think is something that can be improved because, again, young people spend a lot of time in schools. Many young people form relationships with teachers who become their trusted adults. So we think that schools could probably play a bigger role in addressing some of these issues. Next slide, please. So we didn't just ask, who did you tell, but we also asked who helped. And we definitely found that actually when people were telling their parents, in many cases it was helpful. But again, we can see that when young people were telling teachers and their schools, in many cases it didn't help. It made things worse, often because maybe young people weren't told about the limits of confidentiality. So they wanted to tell their teacher, but didn't realize that the teacher had a duty to report, that they had to involve maybe the police, that they had to involve the parents. And often many young people are afraid to tell their parents or they don't want it getting blown out of proportion. We also asked, next slide, please. We also asked teens who they thought should do a better job supporting them. We can see social media companies were a big player here. Almost 30% thought social media companies should do a better job. Parents they thought should do a better job. Police, teachers. So there's many groups who they felt really when they went to them for support were not actually helping them. So what we've done as a team, sorry, next slide, please, is trying to provide more guidance on how adults can respond. And we know from talking to youth that they want anonymous, non-judgmental, and confidential supports. We recognize that actually in this case, maybe schools aren't the place for this, especially as schools will often have a duty to report. There's certain safeguarding policies and procedures, but having the kind of non-judgmental support can be important, even if it can't be confidential, even if it can't be anonymous. We also really recommend that schools in particular change the kind of language that they're using. So many schools, many parents, many adults use this fear-based approach that our research is showing, and many other research show doesn't work. So instead of telling people things like don't send a nude or your life will be over, or don't send a nude, you'll go to jail, it's not actually stopping people from engaging in those behaviors. Often what it does is it stops people from going forward and getting help. So instead, we think we need to teach young people their rights and their responsibilities. So rights around things like you should always be able to control your sexual images. You should be able to control who sees them, who has them, who's sharing them, who's creating them. And it also means you have a right to uphold other people's, you have a responsibility to uphold other people's rights as well. Our team just published this infographic, Why Teens Don't Report Digital Harms to Adults, that lays out some of these key findings and also has different suggestions for how adults can make sure that they're responding. Before I go, I just want to kind of flag some important resources that if you don't know about them, you should. So the first is Need Help Now. This is run by Canadian Centre for Child Protection, which is CyberTip. And so this has a really great resource on things like what should you do if someone has shared or is threatening to share your image. It offers information about your rights. It offers information about how to get these images taken down. And it also offers information about where you can turn to for different kinds of emotional supports that are local to your area. One of the places that Need Help Now is likely to refer you to or refer young people to if they have had intimate images shared without their consent is something called Project Arachnid. This is a really amazing site, and basically what it does is if an intimate image is publicly shared, or if someone is afraid that it's going to be publicly shared, you submit the image and they apply a digital watermark to it. So it's called hashing technology. And what it does is it scans the internet to see if that image has been posted anywhere. And if it has, the website issues takedown notices saying that this is child sexual abuse material. But the technology is also able to take these images down in real time. So if someone's trying to post this image to Instagram, because the image has been hashed, it doesn't get posted in the first place. The disadvantage of the website is that it only captures images that are posted to publicly available websites. So Pornhub, Instagram, Facebook. It can't capture images that have been shared through end-to-end encrypted sites like WhatsApp. But still, this is really important. And again, with this idea that we're telling young people, once an image is out there, it's out there forever, there is technology that shows that that's not always true. So I'm going to stop there, maybe just final slide, with a note that says just thank you. And also our project has a lot of these infographics, information about different helplines, resources, supports that are available in English and French, and some of them are available in other languages as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Katie. Especially, I really like how you made connections with the facts that you have found from your research and also your survey on what technology facilitated sexual violence looks like today and what teens are saying and spotlighting student voice. And just listening to you share that information, I really think that the educators who are in the room right now or watching this webinar at a later date, that it's our collective responsibility in the school community to understand how someone's rights have been violated and teaching what that looks, sounds, and feels like for our students, whether they are in primary, junior, intermediate, or senior division. So yeah, thank you so much for that. And this also leads us to understanding in our role as educators and the factors that constitute healthy relationships and the importance of being a responsible citizenship. And I know Andrea is going to touch on that a bit, and we'll also share some resources that Ophea has to support that. Andrea, I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you, Andrea, and thank you, Katie, for a very informative presentation and bringing out those resources that most of us are not aware of. I'll definitely be taking a closer look at them tomorrow and sharing them out to some other educators within our board as well. So I just wanted to shift gears a little bit in terms like still along the same lines and taking a look at AI and deepfakes and just ripping things from the headlines in terms of what we're seeing across the country, that we know that this is present day. I think what's happening is that AI is getting ahead of us and we might fear it and not knowing where to start, but we need to be aware that these things are happening. So these are just a few headlines. So the first one, amid rise in AI deepfakes, experts urge school curriculum updates for online behavior. So fake news images generated by AI are some of the most distressing new challenges facing students and educators. Tip of the iceberg, AI deepfakes on the rise in Alberta as police warn parents to stay vigilant. So the thing that we need to keep in mind is not the impact that it has on the students as well, right? So we've sort of defined what it is. So it's becoming increasingly used for sexual exploitation and harassing our youth. Although the images or videos are fake, the harm to those victimized is real. Sexually explicit material is often produced without consent of the person depicted. If the content is made public and available online, the embarrassment and distress for the person depicted in the fake content is amplified. Sexually explicit deepfakes are also used to trick youth into sending nudes or live stream sexual acts known as sextortion. So we're focusing on one gender before, but boys sometimes get caught up in this as well quite a bit because they're being extorted for money, and girls are more often extorted for sexual images or videos. So there is a bit of a difference between the two. Owen, if I can get you to go to the next slide, please. Just a couple of more headlines again. AI generated fake nude photos of students circulating London, Ontario High School. And then another one, she was careful online, but this Toronto teen was still targeted with deep fake porn. And then the student saying, I didn't do anything wrong. I was filled with lots of anger. So that just shows you sort of just four different sort of headlines. If we go to the next slide here, this is from CyberTip. And it's just sort of in terms of what they're seeing. They have a reporting system and just sort of pointing the attention that this is a organized sort of attack against our youth. So they're receiving in terms of this is from 2024, about 6 reports in terms of sextortion a day. So more than 2,300 reports in the year. Typically, boys are being extorted for money, as I said before, and girls for images. When genders are known, 83% of sextortion, so this is different than the deepfakes, are male. Sextortion demands for money come from sometimes international organized criminal networks. And when they were made aware of the platform, 63% of these incidents are occurring on things like Instagram and Snapchat and other platforms that students are using on a regular basis. So this is a form of blackmail. I know before we were looking in terms that we have a lot of victims in terms of those that are impacted are those that are presenting as female, but we are seeing in terms of the sextortion, and there's been more things in the news as well, and sort of area specific situations that are impacting boys as well. If we go to the next slide, this is sort of a resource that I found from the RCMP. They actually have quite a bit of information when they're getting into sextortion and human sex trafficking. I've been spending a bit of time within the past few years developing some resources for our health and physical education teachers in the grade 9 level in terms of looking at human sex trafficking and getting into this area as sextortion and hearing, unfortunately, of the stories of students that have been lured into things. We've also had some success where we've had situations where 3 students were about to be picked up by somebody from out of town, and someone alerted the school, and then the police were involved and they were able to intercept the interaction as well. So the incident didn't occur. So this is a poster that could be printed and used in a classroom situation in terms of just sort of like a text message that somebody might see. A student might receive it, or they might see it on a friend or a family member's phone, and then telling them what to do in terms of like looking at this as well. So on the one side, you see the cell phone, the messages, the text messages. I will send this to your friends unless you pay me $500. Answer me. Why? I don't have the money. How much can you pay? Pay me now. So sometimes there will be a bit of a bargaining that can go on with it as well. On the right-hand side, it kind of breaks down in terms of, yes, this is sextortion. This is financial sextortion, form of blackmail. It's a scam and it's trending, and there's steps you can take to move forward. So do stop the chat. Do take screenshots of the text and the profile. So that's something that as an equity inclusion consultant, and I also go out and doing different presentations, and I'll talk about that as well. I encourage students when things are happening online, they're not quite sure in terms of what's happening to them or someone else or video, to take a screenshot. We within our school board have a reporting tool where you can attach that video or the image, and you can report it anonymously as well. Do block the account and report to the platform. Do report to CyberTip or local police, and do get support on CyberTip as well. So don't send any more images, don't pay anything, don't respond to demands, and don't continue the conversation. So the main thing here is to stop the chat as soon as possible. We'll go to the next slide, please. So again, this resource, I believe, is in the chat as well. There's a few different images that come with this resource as well. And this one I found sort of struck a bit of a nerve. So I'm in Kingston. I'm located in Kingston, my school board, and thinking about what's happening within Kingston, people thinking it's a small city. It's not necessarily the situation. Within 1 kilometer, someone is being lured into sex trafficking. So if you're sitting in your home, within 1 kilometer, someone else is being lured into human sex trafficking, whether it be probably in their house, something online with their phone. So within a 1 kilometer radius. So within Kingston, we are located along the 401 corridor. And that becomes a bit of a problem in speaking with the local police and the RCMP and the OPP. There is now a designated unit within our area to help in terms of the investigations for Eastern Ontario, because the 401 has a lot of hotels that are right off of the highway. So we are seeing our students being impacted and being lured, whether it be something through a deep fake or in terms of other sextortion and other things, looking for money, being lured to meeting individuals that they've never met before, and things that are happening at our local hotels as well. We have a situation in Kingston where there is a man in his 30s that is facing about 96 sex trafficking charges. Every time he goes before the courts, there's more that charges that are being brought up. I try to do some digging, and because if you've got 96 charges and the man is located in Kingston, we are assuming that it's true to assume that our students have been impacted. Our youth within the community have been impacted as well. So we need to get the message out to as well to our students. We also need to be aware that our most vulnerable students, so our marginalized, including, boys, Indigenous boys, are being impacted as well. We've seen more recently, I think it was the Fifth Estate in terms of Black boys in Durham being extorted for selling of drugs, and moving to Northern Ontario as well with drug gangs. So there's all different things that are happening online. If we go to the next slide, please. So this is a graphic, a poster of what we've been using in our school board for probably about the past 4 years. We created this with our Human Rights and Equity Advisor. So I'm part of the Human Rights and Equity Advisor team. We're a small team because we're a small to medium-sized board. But this poster is up in every single school, in the majority of our classrooms and our hallways. My work depends on this poster. So it drives the work that I do. So we can see it's a reporting tool, but it's also an investigation tool. So we can see what's being reported. Kate talked about rights and knowing your rights. So the 17 protected grounds are on this poster, and the QR code, you scan it. There's also a link online. You scan it and it takes you to a landing page where you can report a human rights violation or a safe school incident or a bullying incident all in one tool. So you just click which one it is. If it's a human rights incident, you don't necessarily need to know exactly which protected ground has been violated. You just know something is not right, and the investigation will happen. So what happens with this tool is it kicks out back to the school, and the administrator, the principal and the vice principal, will do the initial investigation. If something warrants involving the police, then the police will be called as well. And then the student and their family, if they've put their information in terms of contacting them, will be notified in terms of what the outcome and what's going on with the investigation as well. So what we're seeing is a lot of race-based incidents that are happening, but a lot of things that are happening online, and a lack of awareness from students and parents not thinking that they should be reporting things that are happening online. I'm still amazed in this time frame that parents are trying to handle things at home, or students are trying to handle things at home and saying, well, it happened on the weekend or it happened on a Wednesday night. If it impacts your learning environment, it impacts the school environment, then we want them to report, and then we'll investigate from there. So this is one tool that we have. Not every school board will have something a little bit different than this, but this is something that we developed about a few years ago, and then we're able to go back and take a look at the information and move forward with it. I think that sort of concludes my slides there. If we move to the next one, and we'll be turning it back to Andrea.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing all that. I think I obviously looked at your slides before our session this evening, but I really value your knowledge and experience in this space and also understanding your role and how it's connected to that one. I really like that slide that you shared in terms of anchoring this whole concept that we're talking about in this topic area to human rights. And it's really reminding me as an educator to take that time to understand my own school board's reporting tool, understanding what policies and procedures are in place at our school board, and also how we can teach our students how to really recognize when their rights is being violated and connecting it back to what Katie was talking about before. Okay, so I wanted to make sure that we stay true to our time, 7:43, very good. And we wanted to also make sure that we address the questions that came in during registration. So the participants in the room today all submitted questions during their registration. What we've done on our end was organize the questions into 3 themes. And what we'll do is go through the 3 themes. I'll share the mic with each of yourselves, Katie and Andrea, and hopefully we'll have some time to answer questions that are in the Q&A section right now. And again, those of you in the room right now, if you do have any questions, feel free to hop into the Q&A section in the bottom of your Zoom. Okay. Oh, can you animate? Okay. So the first theme, what signs or red flags should educators look for to identify potential deepfakes affecting students or staff and how they can respond in the moment? Katie, I was wondering if you can talk a little bit about that, and then maybe Andrea, you can follow up after that.
Yeah, I think there's a number of things that you can look for. So one might be young people not wanting to go to school anymore. So kind of like school refusing. So that's something that parents could look for, educators could look for. It could be young people who seem to be kind of even more potentially obsessed with their phone because maybe something's going down where they're being extorted or blackmailed or there's comments that are made about them. And so kind of looking at the phone to try to track what's happening. And then, of course, it might be things like young people feeling disengaged. You can notice that they just kind of don't seem to be themselves. And so I think in the moment, checking in, again, trying to be kind of like non-judgmental, even if you are not the person who maybe they want to disclose to, kind of like reminding them that there are other people, whether it's someone in the school. Andrea, I love that you were sharing these kind of other like anonymous reporting tips, or even things like, hey, there's the Kids Help phone line, or there's other places that you can go and get some anonymous judgment-free support. So flagging that young people have different options in terms of if they need some help.
Perfect. Thank you. And thank you, Katie, for sharing that. I also think that there was a second question that in the Q&A, someone asked, what is our role as educators if we hear about a deep fake or come across one of a student online? I think it's really important as educators, we understand our role. Even when we hear about it from our students or hear the chatter that's happening in the hallway, we shouldn't be ignoring that, right, Katie? And we should really take that time to maybe pull aside and have that conversation with the student to ensure that, hey, there is help at the school level. There is help that we can support them with to ensure that they are safe and they know their rights, right?
Yeah, for sure. And even just checking in with that student, like, are you okay? And maybe you can use it even as kind of like a learning moment, a teachable moment for the other students, another opportunity to have these conversations. Andrea, you talk about the rights-based approach, and our team really values that as well. So letting people know that, creating these deep fake news is a violation of people's right to privacy, the right to bodily autonomy, to sexual integrity, reminding young people that they do have a right to, just as in physical spaces, control who sees their body, who touches their body. Those same rights should apply to digital spaces. You should have a right to control who sees sexualized images of you, how they are created, how they are passed around. So, using that rights-based framework we think is really important.
Yeah, and it all goes back to consent, right? Teaching students the concept of consent and what that looks, sounds, and feels like on an online platform, and ensuring that students understand what to do, whether they see it or involved in it or know of someone who's involved in it, right?
Absolutely. And not being a bystander, right? So being an
Exactly.
upstander, not just seeing something happening, but, checking in, making sure that you're not perpetuating the harm by sharing that kind of image or video as well.
And I just wanted to add in terms of like not sharing the image as well. So when I tell students to take that screenshot is to go to a trusted adult. It's not to be shared with their friends and, passed around, because I don't want them to get caught up in the investigation as well. But it's also harmful to be doing that to another student. It could be a friend, not a friend. The teacher aspect in terms of that question, in terms of educators and our role, I think it brings me back to that diagram, that slide that you had earlier on, where it showed that the teachers were not responding and that the youth want more response for the teachers. They're turning to the parents, but they want all the adults in their spaces to do something. Too often we hear from students that when something happens in the hallway or an educator hears something, that they feel like the teacher's not doing anything. So I've gone into situations where I'm just doing a presentation on human rights and I'm talking about the tool and how to report. And then I'm there for an extra half hour, actually taking screenshots and videos of other students' phones and reporting there on the spot. It's been brought to my attention within our school board and our director. If I hear something, see something, or somebody discloses something to me, I still have an obligation to report. So whatever mechanism that is, it might be to the administrator, it might be to a superintendent, depending on the role in the student, but I still have to report because I'm sitting with that information, and more harm could come to that student if we don't report.
Perfect. Thank you. Andrea, I also want to give you an opportunity to answer this question that's on our slide right now.
I think it was sort of the same things in terms of that you were mentioning, in terms of that lack of engagement, checking that phone all the time, sort of being obsessed with the phone, not being in school. Maybe there's a change in terms of attitude, behavior, things that they had joy doing before. So maybe it was athletics or some other, team or other group that they were belong with, an extracurricular, that they're no longer taking part in those things. Those are a lot of similar signs that we see for other things as well. So we might not necessarily be able to figure out exactly what's going on, but it could just start that conversation and that check-in with the student and the check-in quietly with their friends as well.
Thank you, Andrea, for clarifying. Before I move into theme 2, there was a question in the Q&A, and I'll share it with both of yourselves, Katie and Andrea. The question reads, how do you deal with school boards not allowing posters like this? So I'm assuming it's referencing the human rights poster.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. So the human rights poster, we came up with that a few years ago because the Ministry of Education at the time was sort of predicting and telling us that they were wanting us to capture that data. So we were under the impression that within X number of years that we needed to capture the data, report back the data, but then the ministry has since pulled that back, but we've kept moving forward with it as a board. So I do understand that it's board by board, and that in some school boards it might be a little bit more difficult. I think if there is a very strong parent advocacy group in terms of getting these things done, that would be one way to do it. There's always resistance with anything new with this as well. There's always concerns in terms of a human rights reporting tool. Is this just to report teachers? But this is for when there is an interaction that impacts a student. So it could be a teacher situation, but it's mostly students. We haven't seen an escalation in terms of things be reported from teachers or violations done by teachers, more so than we did before the tool as well. So this is a board by board specific situation. It's not necessarily ministry mandated. And it just depends in terms of who you have as the human rights and equity advisor would probably be my first stop suggestion, to see and work with them and the equity team to move forward with something like a poster. You need to make sure you've got a reporting tool. And then sometimes the challenges that I hear is that sometimes you have a reporting tool, then do you have the resources and the people to do the investigations and do the reporting and analyze all the information? So there's a lot that goes with it as well, but start with your human rights and equity advisor would be my thoughts.
Yeah, and I think as you were speaking, I think anchoring it to the Ontario Human Rights Code, right? And that every student and staff has a right to respect privacy, dignity, and freedom from harassment. And again, a small board might not have a role like yourself, right, in there, but check with their Safe Schools department, right? Take the time to learn about, because it's going to look, sound, and feel different in different boards, and the roles might be assigned differently and different responsibilities. Thank you for answering that.
But we need to start asking and pushing for these things.
Yep. Thank you. Okay, let's move on to theme 2. Thank you. So, Andrea, based on your experience in school settings, and Katie, based on your research, how are deepfakes most commonly being used or misused by students, and what impacts are you seeing on school climate and student well-being? Andrea, if you don't mind going first, and then Katie to follow.
I think students sort of approach it as like they're playing around with AI. They think that initially it's a joke, it's kind of funny. They start to circulate it around with their friends and not necessarily thinking of the impact on the individual and on themselves as well, and then the whole school community, because something like this is not easy to erase. Things are online, they're online forever, and that will follow the individual for, the rest of their life potentially. And what's that impact on their mental well-being? They're 4 years in high school, and it could be miserable if there are things like this that are being out there as well. So again, I think sometimes it gets into be very targeted. So it could be very gendered based as well, that we're seeing. It sort of aligns with our gender, like our bullying data and information that we collect as well. But we do see that it's being used probably more so from one gender versus another as well. That being said, we know that our most vulnerable still, like I've mentioned before, would be those students that are considered marginalized, which could be our non-binary students that are part of the 2SLGQIA community, Black and racialized, Indigenous students, those living with disabilities. Those are all impacted as well.
Thank you. And Katie, if you would like to share what you're seeing in the research space.
Yeah, I think I agree with Andrea that often people are creating these images out of sexual curiosity. They're not kind of creating them necessarily to generate harm. I think in many cases when people are using these Nudify apps, they're not creating these images for circulation. But still, they're not thinking about how even the creation of like deep nuding your classmates still violates their rights. And so, I think many people kind of do it with this idea of like, I'm not hurting anyone, it's not real. And I think we need to move past those discussions and say, well, it's about the violation of rights, regardless of whether people experience it as harmful or not. And so I think like this really is unfortunately just going to require lots of conversations and reminders, because again, I think people will be doing it for their own use, or it was just a joke, like I didn't mean to hurt the other person, kind of doing things without thinking. So I think just like lots of conversations about like, how would you feel if this happened to you? Or can you understand why people would experience this as very distressing and very harmful, and how you doing this really violates their rights? So I think that, we need to just take lots of opportunities to kind of remind young people, have these conversations, dissuade them from doing it as well. If they are deep nuding other people, again, I don't like to use the law or legality as the reason why you shouldn't do it, but reminding them that, if you are generating these images, there are ways you could potentially be charged as well. But I do think the rights frame approach is probably the one that I would definitely encourage educators to pursue first.
Yeah, and before I moved into the last theme, there are clear connections in our health and physical education curriculum from the elementary panel and also secondary panel, where teachers can actually have these conversations in connection to healthy relationships, consent, and what that looks, sounds, and feels like at school, on the weekend, online, offline, and what that entails when we know, hey, someone in my friendship group or someone in my peer group, or I see this image online, that they have a responsibility to do something about it, right? Okay, I'll speed it up a bit. Our third theme. Thank you, Ode. You both shared a few tools, and I was wondering if you are also aware of any examples of school policies, practical strategies, or other classroom resources that schools can implement right away to help prevent harm, build digital literacy, and support students in navigating the AI-generated content, and how to do that responsibly. Andrea, do you want to start off sharing what's happening in your school board?
So in our board, we do have a couple of what we call APs, administrative procedures. So not necessarily policies, but procedures to follow. So we have a digital citizenship one, and then another one in terms of digital use. There's two of them. The digital citizenship one and digital literacy are the two ones that we have as well, that we are often refer back to at the beginning of the school year. I feel like a lot of this work does fall back into the hands of sometimes the health and physical education teachers. But I have seen some school boards where they're bringing it in as part of their literacy component, and then all teachers are sort of embracing it and moving forward with it as well. Again, I think it takes you back to take a look and be aware of what your own school policies are and advocate to make sure that you've got the resources. Ophea has some great resources I've shared some resources and Katie shared some resources that you can use right away, even if it's just a poster in terms of like showing that sextortion and then just stopping that chat, like just that poster. There's some great posters from the RCMP with a QR code as well, where students can scan and be directed to them to report as well. So even if your school board doesn't have something, there are other organizations where you can print their posters and have them in your spaces.
Perfect. Thank you, Andrea. Katie, do you want to address this question?
Just love it. And just kind of highlighting in case people didn't see it in the chat, Katie Glover posted about Ophea's own support, deepfake supports and activity there. So I think like Andrea said, there are loads of different ones from different organizations. So just check out the chat for some examples.
Thank you. If we can move on to the next slide, I do want to share what Ophea has, just following up what Katie was sharing. Thank you. Okay, let me just turn on to my side. Thank you so much, Andrea and Katie. I think it's really important that as school community members and educators, it's our responsibility to support our students in their understanding of how to build healthy relationships, what that looks, sounds, and feels like. And as I mentioned, the health and physical education curriculum supports that. It supports the learning of self-advocacy skills, conflict resolution, decision-making, etc. My colleague Katie on the Ophea side is going to drop a few links into the chat. Thank you. I wanted to spotlight that Ophea's gender-based violence prevention education resources has ready-to-use intermediate and senior classroom activities that are meant to support students' understanding in what gender-based violence is, and also supporting their role as a bystander, and also supporting them in decision-making, communication, and also conflict resolution skills. We also have launched today a ready-to-use primary junior activity that is meant to be introduced in the classroom for PJ students, primary junior students, to help teachers lead those courageous conversations about healthy relationships and consent for the primary and junior level. So check that out in the chat. We also have our e-learning module too. Perfect. Thank you, Katie, for sharing that. And if we can jump right into the slide 39, thank you, into the QR code. Perfect. Thank you so much. I try my best to stay on time, 8 o'clock on the dot. On the slide right now, and also in the chat, we have the webinar evaluation survey. Thank you so much, everyone who is in the room, who stayed with us for the full hour to join us in this conversation about gender-based violence prevention. Andrea, any last words? Then Katie, any last words?
And nothing in terms of like, check out the resources, start having the conversations, build that foundation of trust with your students so they can turn to you when they need to.
Perfect. Thank you. Katie, anything?
Just if you learned something, if you found something useful, pass it on, please.
Perfect. Thank you.